The Echoes of Her Silence. Perfect on paper, Daniel Foster had never been in love, at least not the kind of love that turned your world upside down. At 28, his life was clinical, literal, and carefully managed. He was 3 years into a grueling neurosurgery residency at St. Augustine's Medical Center in Boston, and every minute was accounted for. There was no room for chaos. That was why Arya captivated him. She was everything his life wasn't: quiet, composed, mysterious in a soothing way. They met at a charity gala for medical research. Daniel had been dragged there by his friend and co-resident, Marcus, who insisted he needed exposure to real human interaction. Arya was part of the university's language and philosophy faculty. She was standing alone, sipping wine, when Daniel first noticed her. She wore a simple black dress, no jewelry, no pretense, just presence. When they began talking, the conversation drifted from Dostoevsky to brain chemistry to the symbolism of silence in classical literature. Daniel couldn't explain it. She didn't flirt. She didn't ask him questions like, "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" She just listened. And when she spoke, she had a way of making words feel sacred. He texted her that night. She replied instantly. That's how it began. Their romance grew in the in-between spaces of Daniel's life. Late-night calls between shifts. Sunday mornings at her apartment, reading books in silence. She never complained when he canceled plans. She never demanded more than he could give. She simply fit. By month 5, he was in deep. By month 7, he gave her a key to his apartment. Everyone adored Arya. Marcus said she was the calm Daniel never knew he needed. Daniel's mother, hard to impress, called her wise beyond her years. His sister even asked Arya to help write a speech for her wedding. Arya always said yes, but there were shadows in her silence. She never talked about her past. When asked about her family, she'd say, "It's complicated." Her phone, always on silent, never lit up with notifications. Daniel chalked it up to her introverted nature. Until the night, everything changed. Part 2, A Stranger's Message. It was nearly midnight when Daniel received the message. He had just finished a 14-hour shift, the kind that left his body aching and his brain foggy. As he collapsed onto the couch and reached for his phone, a single text lit up the lock screen. The number was unknown. Unknown number. You don't know her like you think you do. He sat up. At first, he thought it might be spam or some absurd wrong number. But then another message came through. Unknown number. Check the name, Elena Ward. You'll find her there. She's done this before. Attached was a screenshot. It was from a Facebook profile with a different name, Elena Ward, but the photo was unmistakably Arya. Her hair was slightly shorter, but the face, the eyes, the dimple on the left cheek, it was her. Only now, she was posing with a different man, arm around him, smiling. Daniel's stomach turned. He clicked on the profile. It was mostly private, but enough was visible. A string of photos from 2 years ago. Trips to Paris. Beach days in Florida. A tag post on her birthday. "Happy birthday to my one and only, Elena. You've made my life something I never thought it could be." The man's name was Theo Mathers. And they looked happy. Daniel stared at the images for a long time. His hands shook as he tried to make sense of it. It had to be a mistake. A lookalike. A relative. But he knew better. He knew that face, the way she tilted her head in photos, the curve of her handwriting in the birthday card she'd given him. The truth was clawing its way into the light, and he wasn't ready. He dialed Arya. No answer. Again. Voicemail. He didn't sleep. The next morning, he went to her apartment. He knocked. Waited. Nothing. The blinds were drawn. Her car wasn't in its usual spot. He left a note on her door. "Call me. We need to talk. Please." He checked her Instagram. The account was gone. Deleted. Part 3. Truth in Pieces. Daniel spent the next 2 days in a haze. Sleep was fragmented. Food held no taste. And every spare second outside the hospital was consumed by trying to make sense of who Arya, or Elena, really was. He dug deeper. He found an archived website from the university where she supposedly worked. Her name was missing from the faculty list. She had said she was part-time. Maybe she had left. But when he emailed the department under the pretense of a research inquiry, he got a short, blunt reply. "There is no one named Arya Lane affiliated with our department, past or present." It hit him like a punch to the chest. Everything had been fabricated. He reached back out to the unknown number. This time, a response came with a name. Theo Mathers. The same man from the Facebook photos. They spoke the next evening, briefly. Theo was cautious, but not angry. Mostly, he sounded tired. She goes by different names. I knew her as Elena, he said. We were together for 3 years. She disappeared one day, took a few $1,000s and left. I found out later she had been seeing someone else the entire time we were together. When I saw the photos of her with you, I figured you deserved to know. Daniel felt sick. How did you find me? She's not good at hiding everything. Your photo showed up in a tag picture on an old mutual friend's account. Took one reverse image search and there you were. Did she ever talk about her past? Theo let out a dry laugh. She had 5 pasts. Over the next hour, Theo revealed the pattern. She would move to a new city every 1 to 2 years. She had aliases: Elena, Arya, Celeste, Maddie. Always artistic, always soft-spoken. She'd find a man, educated, emotionally available, financially stable. Then she'd slowly isolate them, endear herself, get access to their life, and vanish. She's a chameleon, Theo said, but always leaves damage behind. Daniel felt a rising tide of nausea. His chest hurt, not the dull ache of sadness, but the sharp panic of betrayal. He thought of the poems she used to write in his notebooks. The nights she stayed up late waiting for him. The key he gave her to his apartment. What had she taken? Part 4. The Hollow Apartment. Daniel returned to his apartment that night with a heaviness he couldn't shake. He stood in the doorway for a long moment before stepping inside. Everything looked the same, neatly arranged, quiet, still filled with the scent of lavender from her diffuser in the corner. But it didn't feel like home anymore. He moved room to room, cataloging what was missing. The framed photo of them at the Beacon Hill overlook, gone. The stack of philosophy books she'd claimed were part of her thesis research, gone. A few of his cufflinks, his tablet, and even the emergency cash he kept in the drawer beneath the microwave, gone. She had emptied herself from his life in surgical slices. Daniel sat down on the edge of the bed. Her drawer was open, half empty. A note rested on top of a folded sweater, his sweater, the one she always wore on cold mornings. It was handwritten, in her familiar looping script. Daniel, I wish I were braver. I wish I could explain why I do the things I do, but the truth is, I don't even fully understand it myself. You were kind to me. Too kind. And I tried. I really did. But I was never who you thought I was. I wanted to be. That's the worst part. Don't look for me. A. He stared at the note for a long time, unsure whether to burn it or memorize it. There was no apology. Only confession. Daniel spent the rest of the night in a daze, sitting in the living room, every object a ghost of her. The throw blanket she insisted on buying. The chipped coffee mug she loved. The playlist she'd left on his Spotify account. He wanted to scream, but instead, he stayed silent, just like she had taught him. Part 5. Traces in the Past. The next morning, Daniel called in sick for the first time in 3 years. He didn't have the energy to pretend everything was fine. Instead, he pulled out his laptop and began tracing every thread of Arya's or Elena's life that he could find. He needed to understand her, not out of revenge, but out of desperate need for clarity. He created a timeline. Names, photos, locations. Each revelation added another weight to his chest. He discovered that in Portland, she had gone by the name Maddie Rhodes, allegedly an artist running workshops for trauma survivors. A blog under that name featured heartfelt posts about grief, healing, and spiritual growth. It had thousands of followers. She'd written, "When you've worn 100 masks, the scariest thing isn't taking them off. It's realizing you don't know which one was yours." The irony made his hands shake. He found stories from others, men and women who had encountered her, dated her, trusted her. One woman, a teacher in Minnesota, had nearly filed a police report when Arya disappeared with her jewelry and a forged lease signature. All the stories matched. Arya entered lives like a soft wind and left like a silent storm. Daniel shared everything he found with Theo. Together, they reached out to others, slowly building a network of people who had been deceived. Some didn't want to talk. Some didn't believe. But others were still hurting, still rebuilding. In the quiet of his apartment, Daniel stared at the spreadsheet of names and felt the weight of all their collective pain. And strangely, that made his own a little more bearable. He wasn't alone, but he was still broken. His therapist, Dana, was the one who finally said it aloud. "You're grieving someone who never existed. That's a special kind of wound." He nodded. It was true. Arya hadn't died. But the person he loved, the memories, the shared laughter, all of it had never been real. He'd fallen in love with an illusion, and now he had to bury a ghost no one else could see. Part 6. The Burn and the Rebuild. Spring came to Boston slowly, like a cautious apology. Trees budded with hesitant green, and the air turned soft with promise. But Daniel still walked through it like a man made of ash. He'd begun to rebuild, not because he forgave Arya, but because staying broken would mean she still held power over him. The therapist visits continued. He took Marcus up on invitations again, started running before shifts, even returned to old hobbies he'd neglected: photography, jazz records, cooking things that took longer than 10 minutes. He also wrote. Not a book, not a blog, just pages and pages of letters he'd never sent. To her, to himself, to the man he'd been when he met her, the trusting, optimistic version of himself who believed that being good was enough to be safe. Then one evening in May, he got an email. Subject: she's in Prague now. It was from one of the other victims in the informal network he and Theo had started. A friend had spotted her there, going by yet another name, Sophia Levin, running a yoga retreat, still telling stories, still collecting lives. Daniel stared at the message for a while, unmoved. Months ago, it would have rattled him. Now, it felt like a closing chapter. He didn't respond. He deleted the email. He knew she would never stop running, not really. Arya, or Elena, or Maddie, or Sophia, or whoever she would become next, would always need to shift to survive. There would be more victims, more heartbreak. But Daniel was no longer one of them. He stood by the window as dusk fell, arms crossed loosely over his chest. He wasn't healed, not entirely, but he was healing, and that was enough. He took a deep breath and whispered to no one. Goodbye. Epilogue. Echoes fade. A year later, Daniel stood at the edge of Lake Como in Italy, camera in hand, watching sunlight shimmer across the water. He'd taken a sabbatical, 3 months of travel, a gift to himself for surviving not just Arya, but the version of his life that collapsed with her departure. He'd visited small towns, eaten alone without loneliness, spoken to strangers without fear. He had relearned how to live without waiting for someone to lie beside him. In his journal, on the final page, he wrote, "She didn't just break my heart. She broke the version of myself that thought love could be effortless. Now I know. Love requires truth, honesty, stillness in the face of fear. She gave me none of that, but in her absence, I found it in myself." He smiled. He no longer needed closure. He no longer imagined what he'd say if he saw her again. He didn't need answers, or apologies, or justice. Some ghost you bury. Some you simply stop feeding. Back in Boston, his apartment was smaller now, simpler. No trace of her remained. But in one drawer was the note she left, creased from being opened too many times. He hadn't thrown it away. Not out of sentiment, but because it reminded him of who he'd become despite it. Not broken, not bitter, just wiser and at peace. He snapped a photo of the lake, tucked his camera away, and walked on toward the next chapter. Alone, but whole. The end.